And I didn't know if this being a certificate program or the add-on, if we needed to do that.
Yes, you don't have to pay, but you still have to. Now, there may be a little charge. I'm recording now. There may be a little charge for the fall because I have initiated a process now where you get a certificate that looks like a diploma from Jostens, a real one. I got let's see, I had a paper one for the December, and then for spring, I got Jostens to cut the template and do all of that. And we gave those out, and I've been negotiating with the registrar today. So what I'm hoping is that we will build in a small fee when you register for graduation. It hasn't happened yet, and it may not be for a while, but yeah, you have to apply for graduation just like you were going to graduate, except you don't pay the fee right now. But don't be surprised if there is a small fee for that Jostens certificate, because that thing is quite expensive. But it's very nice. It's very nice. And we started giving those out at the reception following. You don't go through the ceremony, but you can come to the reception at Tucker Center right after graduation, immediately following, and get your certificate. So that's pretty nice, and you get to see everybody. Of course, you might not want to see us.
Okay.
And I want to add that the certificate that you'd be receiving is Dr. Lamb's brainchild. This is something he designed just recently, and I think you folks need to be aware of that.
Well, I think it's the least we can do. I think we should have been doing it all along, but but what I like about it is because you have that certificate and you can hang it on your wall. That also counts like at community colleges for your 18 hours beyond your master's degree. Since it is a true certificate now and not just an add-on, that it is a certificate of 18 hours. That was part of the reason why it hadn't been done in the past. The first thing we had to do was get it to certificate status and then get it made. And so the certificate status was the hard part. The other was just money. So getting the template cut and doing all that. And so right now we don't really have a funding source. So it's been me so far, but School of Ed picked it up for last semester. So hopefully somebody will pick it up this summer, because I'm going to have them made anyway. And so we'll figure that out. Let's see. I don't think my email is going to work. I'm going to send her one. I don't know if it'll get there or not. As you can see, my email is not wanting to work tonight. Come on. I'm going to move on from this. We need to get started. All right. So let's start. Welcome to Mels 603. Let's look at our weekly schedule. This is week 8. Let me make sure I am recording. I am. This is week 8. Thank you for joining me tonight. Sorry that trying to get some housekeeping things going here. We'll be brief. So this week, we were talking about managing facilities, accounting, budgeting, and reporting, resource management chapters 3 and 6. Your discussion boards was do the facilities walkthrough with the instrument that I designed and used in Charlotte-Mecklenburg years ago. Also to interview an administrator about fundraising, and then list the 5 most important steps in school-based budget process, and then locate a copy of your school budget. Does it contain federal, state, and local school funds? Is there anything missing? All right. I want to speak to each of these to start with tonight. I'll start at the bottom. There is law in North and South Carolina that says that school budgets are public documents. I get feedback from time to time from students. The principal said they don't give that information out. Yes, they do. He just, or she just doesn't want to. The law says clearly, North Carolina, it's 115C 288 says clearly, the principal will make available the school budget and the school improvement plan to parents and interested parties, and you are an interested party. So it is a public document. And when you look at that budget, do they have all these different things in that budget? If not, that's a non-compliance issue. All these things are supposed to be in that document if it's a public school. If it's a private school, that's a different story. Charter schools are public schools, and their budgets also have to be made available. So it's important to see how the budget is construed and put together. The 5 most important steps in budgeting, those vary. If I were you, I'd ask a principal about that, but you can kind of figure that out from your own, on your own from reading. The main thing is that you have to account for all of the money, number 1, and number 2, you can't run a deficit. We're not allowed to do that in the public school business. You're not allowed to run a deficit. So the budget has to balance. Interviewing an administrator about fundraising, that's just to kind of find out what the rules and procedures are. Obviously, the principal has to approve those, and but the principal supervisor, either the area superintendent, the superintendent is the one that approves all fundraising. You have to tell them what you're going to use the money for. You can't violate child nutrition laws, selling food at lunchtime and things like that. Money has to be accounted for, has to be turned in nightly, and all of those things. But the biggest thing that I want to remind you about fundraising is that students, candidates in this program, and even some sitting administrators think if they delegate fundraising to a parent group that they're through with it. That is incorrect. You can delegate the activity, but not the responsibility. If the money gets gone, you're on the hook. Let me say that again. You can delegate the activity, but not the responsibility. You will be demoted or fired for failing to maintain operational control or fiscal control is what you will get hit with. So if you delegate this to some parent group and one of them runs off with all the money, you're in trouble. That's one of those school-based functions that you remember. Anything that's a school-based committee and a parent fundraising group is a school-based committee, the principal is responsible for. And so I see it all the time, and you folks see it all the time. Groups, the money gets embezzled, but that comes back on the principal, comes back on the administrative staff. You need to understand that. I get replies sometimes to this question. Oh, the principal says it's easy at their school. They just turned it over to the PTO. Well, sorry. That doesn't indemnify you from the outcomes. And so if it goes bad, you're a part of that. You need to know that. Facilities inventory checklist. Again, when we had schools that had too many dangerous incidents, they got on the watch list for the state of North Carolina. I had to deal with those, and so I made an assessment inventory of the things that the auditors looked for when they came out. And so I honed it down over the years, and what you have is the final version that's in place. Some of those things don't seem important until something goes wrong. But hopefully you've been out and you've assessed your facility to see how safe it is, to see how clean it is, to see how responsive it is to the needs of faculty and staff. that document is not the be all end all, but it's a good starting point for a safe school, and one that's well run and operationally. And that's what we're concerned with this summer is operations. We're not doing teacher leadership or instructional leadership this summer. We're doing operations. We're doing management leadership this summer. Managerial leadership is the standard. There are 7 standards for administrators, national standards. One of them is managerial leadership. That's what we're talking about this summer. And to that end, looking at facilities. Now, in North Carolina, we have a teacher working conditions survey. In South Carolina, you have the advanced ed survey. It would behoove you as a school leader, and especially as a new assistant principal, since you're always going to be in charge of these kinds of things, to know what's on that survey and what the state thinks is important to ask teachers about their facilities. So let's look at that document. These are the things that are on the teacher working conditions survey in North Carolina, and they're very similar on the advanced ed survey in South Carolina about facilities and resources. Teachers are asked about these in the spring survey. Now, different school districts put different weight on these in terms of the administrative team's evaluation. Usually what it boils down to is one of the APs is in charge of facilities. And this document, this teacher working conditions survey, the section on facilities can weigh very heavily when you are assessed on standard. I think is it 3 or 4, that is the standard for managerial leadership. You will be assessed on that standard. And usually the new AP gets these kinds of duties. So let's make sure that we look at these things. Now, you're going to say to me, but Dale, I may not have any control over these. Doesn't matter. You're going to be held accountable for them anyway. So you better figure out how to get control over them. Let's look at the first one. Teachers have sufficient access to appropriate instructional materials. Don't be the person that has the key to the book room and never opens it, or facilities or supplies. Make sure when requests come in for instructional materials, if they're on your campus or in your district, that you follow through either ordering them or going down to the room and getting them. I had that request, but I hadn't got around to it. That's not acceptable. If these materials are available, you need to get them. You need PDQ. You need to get these materials to teachers. They may not use them for the next month. That's immaterial. What's going to happen is they're going to put on the survey. I didn't have access to these materials. They didn't come in a timely fashion. Teachers have sufficient access to instructional technology, including computers, printers, software, and internet access. You say, but then I don't have anything. But you're responsible to make sure that the maintenance requests come in for those things. And if the internet's down, that you contact the appropriate person. The people at the central office that work on these things won't know until you tell them. And just like at Gardner Webb, we have a work order system. Those of us who are program coordinators have a system where we're responsible if something in a classroom on campus where we teach or one of our faculty teach, there's something wrong. It's our responsibility to go to the website and fill out the work order to make sure that these things are working. Computers, printers, software, and internet access. If people need a code to use the printer, and a lot of schools now, you have to have a code. If the card reader's not working or the new person doesn't have a code, you need to get it for them. I know this is kind of that's just common sense, but it's amazing how many of those things just kind of get put off and shoved aside because you're too busy. And then when the TWC comes out, you get killed. And your evaluation reflects that under managerial leadership. Teachers have access to reliable communication technology, including phones, faxes, and email. Again, you'll probably be the one that has to make sure that all that stuff's up and working or get the person out to work on it. Office equipment supplies such as copy machines, papers, pens. When I was principal at a 7th and 8th grade school, a middle school, 31, 2 years ago. I had hair back then, and I got it kinked because I was working on the copy machine and got the wrong wire and got electrocuted a little bit. Not a little bit, a lot. But it was my job to keep the copy machine going. And I was trying to clear a paper jam. But we don't rely on those things as much as we once did. But when we need them, again, it's one of those things when people want them, they want them. You need to make sure that they're working. I don't advise you to stick your hand in a copy machine that's still plugged up, but you need to have somebody out there working on that thing. It'll be your responsibility. Broad range of professional support personnel. Usually that means that you're the person that is doing kind of the micro scheduling within the schedule of specials and support people. If somebody says, I need X, Y, and Z, if it's your job to get X, Y, and Z, you need to get it. Clean and well maintained, you'll usually be in charge of the custodians. You need to follow behind them and make sure that those kinds of things get done. It doesn't matter that the bathroom's been dirty since the Nixon administration. If it's your responsibility, get it clean. Teachers have adequate space to work productively. Make sure you keep the clutter out of the workroom and other common areas. It's your job to keep those areas policed. Teachers are hoarders by nature. And so I know I'm married to one. I was one. I'm married to one. We are hoarders by nature. It's your job to keep those areas policed and keep all the junk out of them because people bring all kinds of things into them. You need to be in the rooms regularly, and you may have to have some of those critical conversations with teachers about the physical environment of their classroom. You need to get them the things that they need, but you also need to monitor them to make sure that those environments are safe and clean, the cords are wrapped up, they don't have a bunch of things piled around in papers. And then the internet, again, if it's down and you're the one that's responsible to call, get it done and follow through and make sure that those workers are out there and doing what they need to do. These are common sense kind of things, but these are usually assistant principal roles, each of these. Not to the actual be the wrench person that fixes them, but to follow through to make sure the work orders and the fix does get done. It's important. It will be a big part of your evaluation. So those are the things that are on the North Carolina Working Conditions Survey concerning facilities and resources. Okay. I can close that document as well. All right. I do want to look at the assessment inventory. Dr. Pickard's with us tonight. Dr. Pickard is heavily involved in school safety with the Sandy Hook Promise, and he's got me involved in that as well. I'm in no way advocating that you join because there is money involved, but what I want you to do is be aware that there are groups, public groups out there that are concerned about school safety, as well as us who are in the business. I'm in schools regularly, so I'm concerned about school safety as well. That's why we started out with safety and crisis plans, active shooter and those kinds of things this semester. I hate that we had to start with that, but that's relevant nowadays. But there's more than just shooters in terms of schools being unsafe now. And as you know, this course is about law and finance. If you have not met these standards in terms of foreseeability and negligence, it's going to come back to get you because you're going to be the person that's going to be in charge. Please remember that once a month you have to do fire drills, but twice a month you have to do these safety inventories, facilities inspections with the custodian 2 times a month. You need to keep them on file. These are the things that I think are important. They were so important that I did them in audit preparation for state audits. And I didn't pick these things at random. These were the things that the state auditors were looking for that they believe made safe schools. these are the things that you need to work on when you become an AP and you're in charge. If you see cars and kids running through bus lots, if you see kids running through car lots, if you see things that are unsafe, you need to take action on those. They could have been doing it that way for 20 years before you got there. But if a kid gets hit in the parking lot and you're the person responsible, it's going to come back to you. So we have all of those things in the first section here. Signage is big. Make sure that you have signs to direct people to the appropriate places so they don't wander around your campus. So that if you see people that are wandering around, you know that they're probably not up to, they're up to no good. So make sure your signage is good where people shouldn't be telling you all the time, well, I couldn't find the office because I didn't see the sign. Well, then you need to get a sign. Here are probably the two things that I see the most violations on. That exterior doors are propped open or aren't locked, where people can access different parts of the building without coming through the office. And the other is that because we have the panic bars on a lot of doors, especially gyms and multi-purpose facilities have the old panic bars on them, that people chain those up. Chains are illegal anytime, anywhere. You can't do that. You can't chain those panic bars to keep people from getting in and out. And you need to make sure that doors are never propped open at your facility. Those are two biggies. Classroom doors are kept locked when rooms are vacant. Restricted areas are identified. You keep clear lines of sight and don't stack stuff around the wall, and old unused room partitions and boards and things. Make sure that all that stuff stays out of large areas. If you got lockers, if they're unused, that they're locked or twist tied where students can't hide things in them or other people couldn't hide things in them. Communication, that you have a communication system. Doors can be locked. If the teacher's not in the room, the door should be locked. Panic bars are working on your doors. You don't dog those down or chain them up. Doors to unsafe places like boiler room, power supply room, have the appropriate doors and are kept closed and locked all the time. My favorite story is I was doing an assessment inventory at a school that was on the persistently dangerous watch list, and so I had the AP that was in charge, and I was doing the inventory, the audit myself just prior to the state coming. And I would have a day and time. The state would tell me what time they were coming to do it, and the week before that same day and time, I would be out at that campus doing an audit with that AP to make sure that anything we replicated as close to possible as to the actual audit from the state auditor coming. And so we were going through, and the AP had the key and opened up the, I guess it was the janitor's closet hazardous chemical supply room, and I just stuck my head in to make sure that nothing was on the floor, no mops or cords or anything in there. That all the chemicals were labeled. So I just kind of stuck my head in the door, and I backed back out, and I thought, wait a minute, did I just see what I thought I saw? I stuck my head back in again. There was a 9-year-old boy sitting there at the desk, sitting at a desk in the hazardous chemical room. And I said, who are you and why are you in here? He said, oh, it's all right. I said, my dad's a janitor, and said, my school's not in session today, so I'm in here today doing my schoolwork. And so we had a kid locked in a hazardous chemical room all day. State auditor come and fired us all from the superintendent down. Of course, the custodian lost his job over that, and I hated that. But, the principal also got moved over that situation as well. You can't have a kid locked in a hazardous chemical room. That's an anomaly, but I've seen common things just as bad as that one. You need to check those rooms regularly. Make sure there's nothing unlabeled. Make sure there's nothing sitting on the floor. Those are dangerous situations. Fire extinguishers, first aid kits, everything labeled, secured, and stored. appropriate signs for first responders if there's an emergency in your building, safety posters, emergency procedures, chemicals not stored on the floor or the first two lower shelves of cases. Bomb threat and crisis response guideline are posted at the phone reception in the main office, and the staff is trained. The crisis kit is present and complete in the main office. Biggest problem in your crisis kits is don't update the class rosters often enough. Make sure that that's done, that whoever, like your data manager or you, updates those regularly, so if there's a crisis, we know where kids are supposed to be. Fire evacuation plans, graffiti is read, recorded, and removed earliest possible time. Have some sort of visitor management system. A lot of you use Identikid, take pictures. People have to present their driver's license. It's amazing to me how many schools that I've visited over the last 8 years that I've worked for Gardner Webb that I had to come in and show my driver's license, but doors would be propped open where people would just walk right in to other parts of the building. That makes no sense to me. It's a system. Yes, you need to have a control point where you ring the bell, get entered in, and provide your credentials. But you can't prop doors open on the side of the building where people can just walk up and walk in. So that's only as good as the vigilance of keeping the doors locked on the place. Students are restricted from loitering in corridors, hallways, restrooms, and other public areas. Every kid needs to be with an adult every hour, every minute of every day. We should never have. And that's one of those things that I'm seeing less and less vigilance on, is like these zero periods and these periods where kids have options as to where they can go. That works fine for the good kids, but that's when tutorials and remediation take place, not your best kids. Somebody needs to know where they're supposed to be and if they're coming. And they don't need to be free to wander the building and choose not to go to remediation today. And the remediation teacher thinks they went somewhere else. That goes back to your master schedule. Every kid needs to be somewhere every hour. And even these zero periods and extra periods and Trojan time, or whatever we call them, those need to be structured so kids aren't left unattended or unsupervised in your building. And it certainly won't help you when you go to court and you say, well, we told them to go. They knew they were supposed to go. That's not good enough. There's an expectation that kids will wander off if you let them. They're kind of funny that way. They'll wander off if you let them to a place where they're not going to be supervised. No potential fire hazards or blocked emergency exits. Ladders are stored in closets, cords tied and zippered together out of the way in classrooms. I see that a lot now that we've got all these, we're adding all these computers to older schools, and I see a lot of wiring harnesses laying on the floor and a lot of cords. All those things need to be secured and taken care of. So again, this is not the be all end all, but this is a good starting point. If your school can pass this inventory, it's a relatively safe place. I would highlight again, making sure that you know where kids are all the time, and that you have a system in your zero period or your Trojan time or whatever your extra period, shorter period, where kids have options as to what you do, that you have that organized. You need to take that on as a responsibility when you become the AP in that building, that you're going to organize that so that adults are expecting those kids, and if they don't come, there's a way to find out so that you can find out where they are. Again, not the best idea to have a triple lunch shift in a block scheduled school, because kids go to class for 45 minutes, go to lunch, and then come back after lunch for 45 more. In a lot of high schools, they don't come back. They just stay for the next lunch shift. Again, if they're doing that on a regular basis and you've not addressed it and something happens, that won't go well for you. Again, that's foreseeability and negligence as well. All right, so that's the assessment inventory. I want to talk briefly tonight about facilities. These are mostly about planning facilities. and you probably won't have too much input in this initially in your career, but if you do, so that you won't be just completely in the dark, when you start talking about facilities planning, um, the first thing that has to be decided is what's kind of going to be the theme of the school in terms of how the school is going to be run. And here are some of the things that would be relevant. Is it going to be a non-graded school? Is it going to be an open campus? Is it going to be school within a school? Do you need video capabilities, computer capabilities? Uh, are you going to offer online instruction or special services? The actual design of the facility will vary greatly according to some of these factors. You need to understand that that's the first thing that will be decided is what type of instruction are we going to offer in this facility, and a lot of decisions then about the actual design and construction of the facility will emanate from that. Administrative policy and educational methodology. So that's what these are. Instructional practices, open lab, cooperative learning, variable groups. That's more about the furniture that goes inside of it. And how a school is upfitted has to do with the instructional modality. You need to know that. And that's kind of the only thing that I'm really interested in that you know from this particular one is that how the school is going to be utilized, modality, always plan for video and computers, and all those things should be decided up front, and that's where it's going to start. So if you're asked to sit in on that, you'll understand that that's kind of the starting point, and you may have some input in that, but that's where you need to start when you're talking about designing or adding on to a facility. You need to, how's it going to be utilized? What kind of furniture is going to be needed? What's the space look like? Make sure that we accommodate technology. Those are the important things from this particular PowerPoint. If your district is going to build a new school or build onto your school, hopefully you will have a construction management team and you will be involved with them. You won't be wearing a hard hat and doing day-to-day construction supervision, but the three people that you will be most involved with are the architect, the clerk of the works, and the construction manager. The architect is hired by your school district. The clerk of the works is the person in your district in the central office that's responsible for capital projects. And the construction manager is the general contractor's person that's in the trailer there on your site. Those are the three people that you will need to be involved with. And that's why I have this one. Now, there's a lot more slides here, but these are the three people that you need to know who they are and what their roles are. And you need to be able to call or access them when things don't go as needed. One of the things that you will learn is, especially if you are doing add-on construction, is that the people who are there, the construction manager, usually it's a construction management firm like CCC or somebody like that. They're interested in quick, fast, cheap. They're not interested in what's good for you. For example, noise issues. I was principal up in the mountainous region of the state a long time ago, and we were adding a wing on, and the construction manager had them start tearing off the side of the building, and I ran out and stopped him. Why are you doing this? He said, well, it's a lot cheaper if we tear it off and build to it than to build up to it and then do interior demolition. But I said, it's kind of cold up here. What are we going to do? If you tear the side of the building off, we're going to freeze to death. Again, they were reclaiming some areas that had these fiber boards stuck to the walls for sound deadening. It had been built as an open concept school, and we were adding wings onto it. And they were taking those fiber boards off the wall, and they had construction adhesive behind them. During the regular school day, they had a crew come in with propane torches, start trying to burn that stuff off the wall during the school day. The fumes were running us all out. These are extraneous examples, but what I'm telling you is you better know the people. If you're under construction or getting construction, you need to know who these three people are, so that when things don't go as exactly planned, you know who to get in touch with in a hurry. Sometimes it's delegated to you as the AP to be the liaison with these people when they need something every day, and they need something pretty much every day, and the principal doesn't seem to have time, and that usually ends up being you. So you need to know who the architect is, the clerk of the works, that's from your district, and who the construction manager is of the construction management firm that's doing your construction. And that's why I have this in tonight. Those are the people. There's some other things here, not as important as knowing who those three people are, because that's who you're going to be working with. And then lastly, I've already talked about that this semester. The problem in facilities is that the local has to pay for them. States got out of that a long time ago. They don't build facilities for you anymore, and it's a local initiative. Capital, which is building buildings and maintaining them, is a local initiative. And again, the burden has fallen on property taxes because we don't have as many large manufacturing facilities throughout North and South Carolina as we one time did. We don't have as much industry, and what industry we have has held the states up for ransom in terms of they've negotiated tax breaks so they don't pay. So even if you have these nice manufacturing facilities that hire people, they don't pay taxes. For example, in Rutherford County, which is not far from the college, Gardner Webb, Facebook built a server farm there. They've just doubled in size. There's a few jobs in construction, but it's a server farm. There's not that many people, but they negotiated tax-free for 10 years. So there is no money. People think, well, they must be, that really helps the schools. No, it doesn't. Again, it falls back to the property taxpayer, private property to fund capital for schools. And that's why it's so hard to get money for computers and technology, because that's considered to be capital. I know that sounds crazy, but that's considered to be capital. It's considered to be furniture. And that's why it's hard to get the technology that we need in schools, because it is a capital. And again, capital is local. You have federal money, you have state money, you have local money. Facilities, building them, keeping them up and cleaning them, keeping them fixed up, falls to the responsibility of the local educational agency. And again, please remember, school boards are unempowered in North and South Carolina. They cannot levy taxes. So they're at the mercy of county commissioners or town commissioners. If it's a town city system, they're at the mercy of them to give them money to keep these things up. And in this era, schools are getting less and less, and they're asked to do more and more. And it's going to put more and more pressure on building administrators to keep up the facilities that they have, to keep them up, keep them operational, keep them clean and neat, to keep things fixed that don't work. That pressure is going to be on you to do those things. I noticed that some districts are not hiring construction management firms and putting a lot more pressure on school administrators to watch over the people that they send out to work. These are all things that are happening now. In many charter and private schools, they have to do those things on their own. Public schools more and more so. There was a time 20 to 30 years ago, you rarely saw a construction project that a construction management firm wasn't hired. Not always the case now. So you need to be aware of those things. But again, the purpose of this PowerPoint is to remind you there's diminishing money coming in, and it's going to be harder and harder for you to keep your facility maintained and safe. And build new ones, you're going to have to deal with the old ones more and more and try to keep those up and keep them safe. Okay, so here comes the question. What are my thoughts on the local school finance study? That was really eye-opening for me, seeing how much local funding our county receives. Does this mean we give back most of our state funds? No. It doesn't mean that you give back most of your state funds. It means you give some of them. The local school finance study, again, emanates from years of Leandro and all the fallout, that continues from poor districts versus rich districts. Poor districts are receiving some more money, but not significant more money. The most money that's come into districts, again, is through letting of bonds, and local voters have to vote for those, and they've not been very generous with that lately. And so there is some give back on state funds. That is correct. When they get a good bit of local funding from different sources, there is some give back. It's not a district power equalizing, but there is some give back. There is a formula for that, but it is local to each particular district. It's not quite district power equalizing, which is district power equalizing is a set formula for everybody. This is more of a case by case. That's what came out of Leandro, was it's a case by case basis now. We can't just group. We just don't have a set formula, which would be DPE, district power equalizing. That's what the low wealth districts were suing for, was a standard formula. They did not get that. The state said we will decide it on a case by case basis. So I don't know, each district it's different, but when they get that money, there is some give back. Yes, there is some give back in other areas. This was supposed to be funded by the lottery, but as we know, there's not near as much money left over from the lottery as was advertised initially. Less than half of what was told would go is actually available to schools from the lottery. But yes, this is an extension of Leandro. As a reminder, the Leandro case of the 90s was low wealth districts wanted the state to stop doing flat funding where everybody got the same per pupil. They wanted the district power equalizing formula so that low wealth got more money and high wealth got less money. Leandro was finally decided that would not happen, but that they would look at and give extra money on a case by case basis, and that money would be generated by a lottery. So that's where that's coming from. Good question. All right. That's pretty much all I wanted to cover tonight. I don't want to get in too deep into the finance part, because most of that is at the principal and above level. I want to train you to be a principal, so you should spend some time with these PowerPoints, because they're kind of bigger issues. But we don't have the time to delve into them. What I'm trying to highlight for you is what's relevant to you in your first job. That you need, the hurdles that you're going to have to get over in facilities and finance, so that your first job doesn't become your last job. And again, in an era where school funding or capital, which comes from local, is declining, it's going to be harder and harder to keep your facilities up and running and keep them safe. But it doesn't cost much to keep them clean and safe. That can be up to you. You won't always have new facilities and new things. And yes, you will have some exposed wiring and some different, but you need to take it upon yourself to make your place as safe and as clean as you can for the students and faculty that work there every day. That would be, again, that falls under the standard of managerial leadership. Questions you have for me about these things that I've covered tonight? Now, as a reminder, I will try to join you next week, but Dr. Pickard is going to be running the show next week, and he's going to be doing budget laws, which is my favorite. I can't believe I gave him that one to do. That's my favorite one of all. What I've done is I put together a packet of what I consider to be the most relevant budget laws for you, and they're pretty much equitable in both states. So I just have the North Carolina ones, and he'll cover that. I'll try to join you if my internet connection is solid. It's not good enough to record, so he's going to be doing the session, and I'll listen to him next week. But he's going to be covering budget laws. That's going to be primarily what he will cover next week. Next week, you should be moving to CAP Task 1. I'm going to remind you that when you get to CAP Task 1, that's the only task that's due this semester. But let me remind you again, I've told you 4 or 5 times this semester, make sure that you assess the 5 required areas. If you want to add more to the 5, that's fine. But make sure you do time, facilities, resources, teacher leadership, school leadership. Teacher leadership's empowerment. Make sure you do those 5. Now, when I say make sure you do those, you look at the teacher working condition survey or the advanced ed survey. You look at those areas, you talk about them in general, but you identify the 1 or 2 lowest items that come in that from teacher responses. And then you will make a recommendation as to what it will take to fix them. You'll talk to people about those recommendations and get their opinion, why things are bad and what you can do. And then eventually you will put together a cultural advocacy plan. But in that plan, you will have specific activities like we always do, and resources, persons responsible, where you're going to have specific activities to address those low areas in those 5. Again, I see too many times folks talk about those 5 areas, but they don't identify the ones that need attention, the items that need attention. Remembering that when I showed you that list of TWC earlier, those were the items that teachers are asked to rank. You pick the item or 2 that's the lowest on that list. You make a set of recommendations that address those low items. The needs assessment that you'll do in task 2, you just re-email those or survey monkey those items back out again that you've identified as the lowest. And so those 5 items will stay with you all the way through the 4 tasks of the CAP. Too many times I see people discuss those 5 and then they jump right into PBIS and managing student conduct. You can add that, but you can't take one of those 5 out, or you can't have a set of recommendations and specific activities in your plan that don't address those 5. I see some plans all they address is PBIS and discipline, managing student conduct. No, it can be there, but these 5 got to be there as well. So make sure the way you start out right with that is that you identify the lowest items in each of those 5 areas. And that gives you your starting point to kick off your CAP. If you just discuss them, then you really haven't met the standard of what we're looking for. We want you to make an executive decision. This needs to be addressed. You recommend that this be addressed. And then you have to figure out by talking with people, how it should be addressed. What specifically are you going to do to fix that? Again, that's kind of been the theme of tonight. You've got to be the person that fixes this stuff.
Dr. Lamb, can I add a point?
Yes.
Before we move on? Folks, Dr. Lamb made several references to safety issues in the schools, and it would be great if we could be everywhere all the time, and we could stay on top of all this. But that's why it's so important that you have a very strong working relationship with your staff, because they are everywhere and they see everything. And you've got to be knowledgeable or approachable enough, and I'll emphasize the word approachable. Folks, if your staff sees an issue or a concern, maybe even a safety issue, but they don't feel like you're approachable enough that they can come to you with this without consequences, then that's not a healthy relationship between you and your staff. Let me give an example of this. Dr. Lamb will know what I'm talking about. About a year and a half ago, secretary at the central office received an email from the superintendent requesting very personal information. I'm talking about salary information, certification information, social security numbers. And instead of thinking, oh, well, this doesn't look right, instead of saying, I'm going to go talk to my superintendent about this before I send it, as she stated in the investigation, she didn't feel comfortable enough to go to her superintendent because she did not feel that her superintendent was approachable. And you can imagine what happened when all that information went out. So you've got to make sure that as assistant principal or principal, that you are very approachable by your staff to help alleviate issues that they may see or concerns they may see that you may not see. That's why it's so important to have a trusting relationship with everybody on your staff in all areas, from your classroom teachers to your specialists to your janitorial staff to your cafeteria people. They all feel like that you're approachable, and they know they can come to you on any issue that they see or issues of safety they see. So keep that in the back of your mind as we move forward.
Okay. And to that end, that's why we ask you to go out and talk with people. When it says qualitative, when you see the task that says qualitative, that you're to collect qualitative data, that's interviews and observations, going out and talking with people, so that building a relationship where people will feel comfortable to come and tell you these things. And they can offer their opinion, and sometimes they have good ideas, but a lot of things will go better if folks have buy-in because they were asked. So when you identify these low items in each of the 5 areas, again, it's listed clearly in task 1 of the CAP: time, facilities, resources, teacher leadership, school leadership, teacher leadership being empowerment. When you see those 5 areas, you're to figure out, by looking at the data, which is the lowest, which of these items, make recommendations, go out and talk to people. What should we do about this? We've recommended we do this or that. Is that a good idea? What do you think will fix this problem? And then come up with specific activities that you're going to do to address those problems. But to Dr. Pickard's point, you've got to be approachable enough. So hopefully we're teaching you from the very beginning. People's input is important in keeping up your facilities and working in these areas. It's important, period. And so that's why we have you do it. Okay. All right. So again, the 5 areas are in task 1 of the CAP: time, facilities, resources, teacher, school leadership. Those are the 5 areas. Don't forget them. I should see those 5 all the way through. If I just see them in task 1 and you jump to PBIS and conflict management in task 2, I'm going to be angry. I taught you better than that. All right. Any other questions that you have for me? Let me check my emails. All right, I think we're good. All right, hopefully we'll get to join you next Wednesday. If not, you have a good time. If my internet connection is not good, you have a good time with Dr. Pickard, and I will see you, if nothing else, I'll see you in 2 weeks. Everybody have a good week. Work on your evidence artifacts.